Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for joining today's Tips and Tricks webinar. Today's topic, as you can see, is Infinity Threat Exposure Management. Uh, Please use the Q&A chat. If you have any questions during this webinar, we'll make sure we answer those. Our presenter today is on the threat exposure team, James Traxel. James, what do you have for us today?
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. So I'm James Traxel coming to you from Annapolis, Maryland, and super excited to give you a bunch of tips and tricks on how to be a threat exposure management power user. To bring you to some context, we are in the Checkpoint portfolio under Infinity Platform Services, so threat exposure management. So if you follow along the Checkpoint pillars, that's where we live. We were acquired as a standalone company named Verity in July of this year. So we're one of the newest members of the Checkpoint family and super excited to be here. You may recall, if you've engaged with the team, that there are a minimum number of integrations that would be helpful for you to drive value from the platform. So the entire product connects via API to the products that are actually in your environment. And so from a minimum perspective, we're looking for a next generation firewall. So one of the big four that's running threat prevention, specifically IPS is most useful. We also are looking for a source of vulnerabilities. So a source of vulnerabilities these days can come from many different sources. Can be a traditional vulnerability scanner, such as Qualys, Tenable, Rapid7. It can also be a CASM tool, like Clarity, Armis, Exonius. It can also be a CNAPP tool, so for your cloud vulnerabilities, Wiz, Orca. And by the way, these are just examples. This is not the inclusive list of what we integrate with. We also have the ability to work with your EDR vendors today. So most of your EDR vendors have a license for vulnerabilities that they may see within their specific purview. And you notice here that we have our CTEM framework. So continuous threat exposure management is a space that threat exposure management lives in. And the CTEM framework here is listed in the 5 different stages. You notice that most of the vendors live in the first 2 stages, in that we can help you with the last 3 stages of CTEM from a framework perspective. So if we take a look at what is one of the fastest ways to enhance your CTEM project, it would be surrounded around integrations, right? So there's over 70 plus integrations that can fit into the platform. I just mentioned the minimum, but we have a whole bunch of what we call sources of data and information that can be combined into the platform. And so most of our customers will start with 2 to 3. So I mentioned 2 to start. Lots of folks will then add in additional vendors. So things like attack surface management or breach and attack simulation. They may further work with their remediation operations with things like ticketing systems. They may also choose to open up their SEM so we can take advantage of the data that's in the SEM. And we're going to walk through a few of those use cases in the platform. And I'm going to give you a quick tour of how to use this most effectively. So I'm going to switch over to my interface here. I have a couple of different demonstration environments, so I'll probably switch between 2 or 3 of those. First thing you'll notice is we've added 2FA, mandatory to all users logging into the platform. Of course, that's good security. If we take a look, we are now looking at the dashboard for threat exposure management.
James, we're still seeing your prezo.
Thank you. How about
there
that?
we go. Got it.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. So now we're looking at the dashboard for threat exposure management. So the first thing you're going to notice is it's really, really busy, right? And so that's the reason I'm going to give you a quick tour. So let's start up in the top right here. You're going to see the number of logs that are analyzed in the actual platform. So that'll be a real-time number as we refresh our context of the actual platform itself. You'll also notice this number here, 114, open insights. So this is the number of things that you can actually fix in your environment. And I should say the word can and should fix in your environment. So you may be familiar with those if you're a customer today, or if you've done a POC with us. But continuing the tour, you'll notice we have critical insights, high insights, medium, and low. This gives you the ability to kind of sort and focus on specific insights. But something you may not know is that if you hover over things in this environment, you will notice what type of insights you're actually working with. And so if you want to focus on a specific type, you can simply hover over those and you can focus in on those. So don't be afraid to hover over things in the environment. You may hover over, say, connected integrations as an example. And you will see here is what's connected to your specific platform. And then you will also see the capability of that integration. So not all integrations are created equal. Unfortunately, we don't write APIs for every single security vendor out there. The security vendors write those APIs for us, and they largely determine what capabilities we have with each product. In fact, it's one of the key values of threat exposure management is we actually understand what those products are capable of. And I will go into what each of these mean, but the two most popular integrations you'll see follow our use cases. So one is indicators management, meaning the ability to send IOCs to that particular product. And the other would be protection hardening, which would mean we have the ability to change, say in this case, an IPS rule to harden the particular posture of that specific vendor itself. So you'll notice each vendor is not created equal, right? So some we have indicators management only as an example, and others we have the ability to do many more things. So feel free to hover over these. That's little known, that's actually in the environment. You will also notice remediation statistics. So this is where you're tracking your MTTR, mean time to remediation. So that's the time from when your tool finds a known exposure in your environment to the time that's actually fixed. So this is the key KPI that every CISO, CIO wants to track and understand. Are we getting better at this particular piece? We're also tracking the labor and the cost savings. Now, you can also tweak this up to the last 6 months from a statistic standpoint. So some folks miss this little arrow here. You can also change this formula. So as an example, this is loaded in at a $25 loaded labor rate. You can actually adjust that to what your actual loaded labor rate is so that these statistics become meaningful to your specific environment. Now, continuing the tour, we're going to take a look at controls hardening. And this is effectively your report card on how you're doing from a network, endpoint, and an OS perspective. And so this 53% means that 53% of the network security controls that can and should be on are on. So in other words, about half of what's going on in your environment is correct or in a good state, depending on how you look at it. We have 42% that's not. Now, what you see in the middle here are these little diamonds. These are known as insights. You'll notice that matches our logo, of course. And if I were to click on this, I would see the insights to change those things that are sitting in inactive mode to detect, right? So if we look at an insight that you may be familiar with here, we're going to move this protection from inactive mode to detect. Now, one thing that's little known is it takes just as much CPU power to move something into detect as it does to move it into prevent. So this is not something that should be taken lightly. So the reason we built the machine learning model to ensure that things will not break when you do that. So it's non-trivial. But if it's surfaced here, we have validated that we're not going to break something when you turn this on. So specifically, if I go back to the front dashboard here, you'll notice that we have added here in the last couple of months a business disruption status. And this is telling me that 3% of the protections that are in my environment are not safe to use, meaning they are too CPU intensive to turn on in your specific environment. So this works for Cisco, Palo, Checkpoint, Fortinet, right? So we're checking the health and the context of the environment before we do that. So if we follow practice here, we're doing the same thing with endpoint hardening. 53% is on, 47% is off. We have the 9 here in the middle, the insight, to go ahead and make the change for these to move to a protected state. And we also have OS hardening. So OS hardening is a very important use case within the product, but we don't talk about it a whole bunch because everybody gets really excited about the network hardening components. OS hardening simply means that we're going to work in conjunction with an integration such as Microsoft Intune, and we are going to run detection scripts on your Windows machines, and we're going to determine, are the proper hardening best practices followed for Windows, yes or no? Meaning, as an example, SMB1. That is a no-no. That should not be turned on in any environment today. And we're going to make the suggestion that you turn SMB1 off via change in the registry key. So 73% are now following best practice in your environment, and 28% are not. Again, we have insights in the middle here to go directly to this. So we have LSA protection as an example. So we see that this is actually disabled in your environment. And what we're going to do is suggest you move it to enabled or turn the registry key on. So therefore, you have LSA protection for your passwords on your Windows machines that follows best practices. You'll notice here that we're going to give you some data on the hosts. So 70% not detected, 30% is detected and disabled. What we want to do is turn that on to ensure that an attacker cannot use those unencrypted passwords on your Windows machines. So something that's not talked about quite a lot, but something that's very, very powerful. If you read any CISA alert or threat intelligence alert, there's almost always Windows hardening tips and tricks that are a part of this. The latest SharePoint vulnerability, as an example, had lots of information on how you should be protecting your OS systems. So let's slide down a little bit farther here. We have security hygiene. Another topic that we don't talk about a whole bunch because of the popularity of our other use cases. But what security hygiene means is that we're watching over the status of your existing security controls, right? So if you look and zoom in here, I know this is pretty tight font, but we're looking at software updates, right? So how many devices in your environment are not up to date from a software perspective? Obviously, it's important if there are CVEs in your environment, right? So you want to make sure you're up to date on software. Quite frequently, there's licensing issues across a large estate, so we're looking for those. We're also looking to see if maybe something is disabled, right? So lots of times we may do some troubleshooting sessions. We turn something off to troubleshoot. We forget to turn it back on, right? So maybe we do that on a Friday afternoon. We've got to turn it back on. We come in Monday. We're expecting that IPS to be on and it's off. We may also have the IPS on, but maybe we didn't associate it to a profile, right? So that would be an example of a configuration mismatch that's in there. So a very powerful tool, especially for larger estates, to understand that you now have a watchdog ensuring that these products are up to date and in the standing that you expect them in. Now, it's super important to understand how effective your efforts are within the platform itself. So from a threat exposure standpoint, one of the things you're obviously trying to block is attacks, right? And so this dashboard or widget, as we call them, will showcase to you the number of attacks in your environment. Of course, you can toggle by different time lengths. You can also see I blocked 598,000 by blocking IOCs. We also blocked 577,000 via protections. Now you may see this not blocked number here. This is very interesting. 722,000 were not blocked, but could have and should have been blocked within your environment. So we give you the ability to actually make the change so you can actually block those 722,000. And I'll show you that here in a moment. But the idea here is we're constantly looking at what more could you do with your actual security posture, right? And so the idea is that you have a nice hockey stick movement from hundreds of thousands to millions of attacks. Because what you want to do from an IOC perspective is you want to start to block those commoditized attacks, right? Most folks in most environments just simply try to ignore them. They don't actually look at, could I just block that and get them to not log to my SEM as an example. So let's take a look at those IOCs in specific. So this is our IOC lifecycle management dashboard. You'll notice IOCs, IP addresses, file hashes, domains, and URLs across the top here. So you can click into any one of those. You'll notice that these logos are changing. So this is what those IOCs are actually installed on. So in this particular case, this domain is now being blocked across my entire security stack. And that's the point of this page, is to be able to block across your entire stack and to remove these indicators from the stack as well. So no security control has an unlimited ability to absorb IOCs. So we actually give you another widget here called indicators pressure. That's actually going to track the status of how many indicators are loaded onto the device itself, right? So as an example, Checkpoint Firewall is going to hold 50,000 IOCs. So you're sitting at 12%. You're doing just fine. You'll also notice, again, we have some more hover over options. What is the firewall capable of receiving? Right, so these are indicators. So file hashes, domains, and IP addresses. You'll notice in the case of Imperva, as an example, they can only accept IP addresses. They don't have the capability for the other two. So you're able to manage what is on those security controls and what is coming off of those security controls with ease, right? So this can be into the millions across tens, 20, 30 security controls within your actual environment. And so how do I get things on my security controls? So the first thing we can do is come into our threat intelligence catalog, and we can take a look at some of the things we can subscribe to. Now, truth be told, we can connect to any threat intelligence source. These are examples that will be in the product or are currently in the product, but we can certainly add to them if you have other sources of data. So to just go through a few of these, this is actually one of my favorite features of the entire product. It's called our adaptive block list. And you'll notice that it is only for firewalls because this is a very high volume blocking, meaning we can't deal with that 6,000 number. We're going to need into the 50,000 type numbers to start to block this. Now, what exactly is an adaptive block list? So when an IP address hits a firewall, the first thing it's going to do is, if it has a cloud service, which all of the big four do, the cloud service will check and see if it's known bad or not. If it's known bad, it will block the IP address as an example. Now, if it's not in that database, it's not in, say, Checkpoint's Threat Cloud or Palo Alto's Wildfire or Talos, it will allow the IP address into the environment, right? So if it's going to do a match and there's no explicit rule and there's nothing in the threat cloud, it will allow it. Now, that's not necessarily great. And the reason is we need to see the collective intelligence of the entire internet about this IP address. And so the way that we do this is, after that process is complete, we will do a real-time lookup on this IP address. And if we determine that the internet determines, I should say, that if we have a confidence of 100%, we have a high number of reports that this is known bad, we'll actually go ahead and block it for you, right? And so this is effectively real-time threat intelligence from the entire internet, examining every IP address that comes across your firewalls, right? And that would work across all of the big four that are out there. It's not a Checkpoint feature. Super powerful, right? You're now going to be blocking way more than you've ever blocked, simply because you are now doing a real-time IP reputation lookup. In practice today, most folks are doing this in their SEM. They're trying to do enrichment with threat intelligence into their Splunk, let's say. Unfortunately, that means it's already in the environment. It also means it's into your logging, right? So this will certainly cut down on the amount of logging generated in any environment. So that's our adaptive block list, or real-time threat intelligence. We also have an attack surface feed. The attack surface feed is one that will actually look at the CVEs that are in your environment. So we talked about those sources of vulnerabilities that are coming into your environment. And we will actually go and enrich those CVEs and determine which IOCs are associated with those CVEs. In other words, I see this CVE being attacked in the wild. It's typically attacked from this IP address, right? So there's large internet scanners today that are doing this every day, all day. And without you doing anything with a CVE, we will, if you subscribe to this particular feed, we will block the known IOCs to all of the CVEs in your environment. So one of the very first steps that our customers do with our customer success manager is to turn on this feed. Because now I have instant protection, theoretically, from the known bad things in my environment, those CVEs, and how they are typically attacked. Now we have a few more here that I want to cover from a feed perspective. We have CrowdStrike as an example. So this is an example of a commercial feed. So you would need a CrowdStrike threat intelligence license. But CrowdStrike has worked with us and partnered with us to allow us to use their feeds with their customers for the enhancement of what they have. And you can put in any set of data that you would like to be spread across your security stack. So as an example, you could say, all right, Abstract Panda from the airline industry. If I hit save, anything that CrowdStrike has that matches these three categories would be spread across my security controls. It would also be removed when it's no longer relevant across the security controls. So we have Recorded Future coming here by the end of the year as another commercial feed. We also have feeds coming from Checkpoint Threat Intelligence into the product, but super cool. Now, let's talk cloud. So cloud's a difficult one from a threat intelligence standpoint. So first of all, if we're getting hammered from AWS from bad actors, you can't just block AWS, right? That's not something that exists. But what you can do is you can block known bad IOCs, in this particular case, IP addresses from the cloud, right? So we watch and monitor and work with threat intelligence providers to understand which known bad IP addresses are coming from the cloud to target our on-prem firewalls, and you can block those. Right, so just another example. So you see the idea here is that you can work with any Styx and Taxi feed that's out there. We also work with ISACs, right? So MSISAC, FSISAC, HSISAC, MISAC, EISAC, you get the point. We can work with all of those. We would use your username and credentials in your account. We would pull that information into the product and spread that data across. Now, one last feed I want to point out here is you're probably familiar with geolocation for your IPS in your firewalls. That allows you to block, say, a country, right? So I don't want any traffic to come from this specific country. Well, inevitably, there's always an exception. I am now doing business with that country. I now have an employee in that country, and I can now no longer block that specific country. So we had a great protection. Now we don't have a great protection. Well, the answer for that is we are going to give you the ability to block just the known bad things from that country, right? So in this particular case, we're talking about Brazil, but you can select any country here. And you are now just blocking the known malicious IP addresses coming from Brazil versus blocking the entire country of Brazil. So it's a really nice halfway medium between blocking everything and allowing traffic to allow business to be done. So that's a little bit about the IOC management page. One last feature here that you may not have seen before is that we actually do have exclusions, right? So we can provide a global exclusion within the actual platform itself. So if you're ever in a situation where you say, I don't want that to ever be blocked, you can certainly add that in here. We all know lists in the internet can put domains or IP addresses in a bad place sometimes, and they're not necessarily malicious. We also have the ability to add manually, right? So if your SOC calls you and says, hey, put this IP address in or this file hash in, you can control the timeout. So this is when the IP address would be removed from the particular device. You also have the ability to import a CSV or export CSVs from this, or pull specifically from a URL that's out there. So lots of SOCs will have a URL that they stand up, and we subscribe to that URL. Therefore, in real time, they're providing their threat intelligence into your security controls. So one thing you may not have seen is the attack surface threats map. So most folks are familiar with lots of threat maps that are out there. Checkpoint has a really cool one around the threat cloud, and that is showing all of the attacks that Threat Cloud sees. This map is showing only your traffic. So because we're plugged into your firewalls, to your WAFs, to your SASE, to your EDR, all of your security controls, we're seeing those logs. And we are now representing them visually for you, so you can understand where is the traffic flowing from and where are your potential hotspots within the world. It's obviously cool to put up in a SOC as well, but this is only your traffic. So this isn't somebody else's traffic that you're seeing here. So we have lots of folks that identify hotspots and make changes or target specific areas. So let's finish out with insights. One of the most powerful features in the platform, of course, and the goal is to fix things, right? So we can remediate 114 things. Maybe I don't have time to do that over my cup of coffee this morning, so I'm going to get particular. I'm going to click on this filter button. This filter button is super powerful. It gives you lots of capabilities to filter assets, as an example. So you can designate important assets in the product itself. You can also target creation time of those insights. You can say, tell me, what did I miss from last night, last 24 hours, etc. You can also look for specific CVEs, right? So we have those celebrity CVEs like Heartbleed or Log4j, or name another one that's out there. You can target just that CVE and see if there's an insight already created in the platform to go ahead and address that specific CVE. You may choose to do it by CVSS score. Maybe your corporate standard today is to look at anything that's 7 and above. You may also say, if it doesn't end up on CISA's radar, then I don't want to look at it, right? If it's on CISA's radar, I want to know about it. I want to pay attention to it. You can do the same with EPSS scores. It's a relatively new scoring system around exploitability. You can also look at the actual impact. So that front screen we were looking at, this is that breakdown within the filters. And then as you understand the platform further, you understand that each insight has a type, right? So if we look at this insight on the screen, it says protection activation. So I'm going to take a protection that's off. I'm going to activate it to detect, as an example. So you can come in and work specifically on a specific insight type as well. So as an example, maybe you want to look at under attack. Okay, so this means I'm actually under attack. So my logs are telling the Threat Exposure Management platform that I'm under attack, and I want to figure out why and what can I do about it. So in this particular case, I have malicious activity focused on this specific CVE. It's under active exploitation. My protection that would block it is in monitor mode, and we're going to recommend that you change it to block. So if I click on that, I will then pull up the remediation editor, which is going to showcase what we're going to do about it. And so if I walk through the specific actions here, I'm going to turn on this specific protection, and I'm going to block these specific IOCs. This is a one-to-many remediation for this specific attack. So in other words, I don't want to block just the attacker. I want to block I don't want to just block the attack. I want to block the attacker. And I'm going to do that across this specific firewall that's sitting in my AWS environment. And here are the hosts that are associated with that particular attack. When I hit confirm, I have now blocked via the protection and the indicators in my environment. So just an example of how you can walk through. If you're a power user of Tenable, you may know that there are such a thing as an unscanned asset. Maybe Tenable missed it today for whatever reason. We can pick that up in the platform. And our remediation is actually to kick off the scan. So we're going to update the scan itself and kick off that scan. So there's lots of tips and tricks within the platform itself. I encourage you very much to go in and hover and click around. Also contact your Checkpoint representative to learn more about the product. I'm always glad to be involved with Rob and team. And I thank you very much for your time. Rob, do we have any questions?
We sure do. Let me see here. Is there a process to request another vendor integration or IOC feed if it's not currently available?
Sure thing. Just need to go ahead and put that through your Checkpoint account team. We open up an RFE, request for enhancement within the actual product. Of course, we match it with the requests that have come in from existing customers and ensure that that's in the roadmap. We also will custom build integrations as a part of a purchase. So if you're looking to purchase the product and we're one integration short to make the value statement for you, we'll be happy to write that in the contract and produce it for you.
Great. Just to be clear on the insights, are they like general insights or are they tailored to your environment and what we're seeing in your environment?
Yeah, so they would be specifically tailored to your environment. So everything you see here in the dashboard is data that I'm combining from the products that are connected to the platform. So you won't see anything here that's general or best practice. This is all going to be based upon what your tools are telling me of known bad things and the capability of the control itself.
This one I'm not clear on. Maybe it makes better sense to you. Could we share directly threat intelligence catalog for TEM with other solutions? Is this included in the licensing?
So from a sharing perspective, all we're going to be able to offer today would be to share out to the security controls that would be connected to in your environment. So if you were looking, as an example, to use this threat intelligence data to enrich your SIEM, you would then need to export the data and pull it into your SIEM as an example. But the purpose of the threat intelligence is twofold. One, to understand what is the most important thing you could be fixing today. So from an insight standpoint, that's factored in. And then the second component is how quickly can we get that threat intelligence on your devices and blocking attacks so that you are not susceptible to them.
Question on the data itself. It's real time, right? It's not like a scheduled polling type of thing.
Yeah, so the data is going to refresh a couple of times a day. So there are processes that are scheduled, but pretty much everything is being refreshed, as quick as humanly possible. As an example, if you run a vulnerability scanner, you're running that generally once a day, right? So that data is going to be good from that data pool itself. From a threat intelligence standpoint, obviously, that's much more dynamic, or that IP reputation example that I gave you, that's a real-time lookup of it. So I can't say everything's real time in the platform and you're good to go. There are scheduled components to it based upon the way the technologies work.
Okay. I just got another one here. Our attack score based on the MITRE ATT&CK framework?
Attack score. Wondering where that is coming from. We do have the ability to assign and understand which TTPs from MITRE ATT&CK are associated with each of the vulnerabilities. So that is mapped in the platform itself, but the priority is not assigned based on MITRE ATT&CK. So there's an example.
Just please let me know if that answered your question there quickly in the Q&A. Just want to make sure we're clear on that for you. Let me look. I think that covers it, James. Thank you. Great information. Lots of information. Very powerful tool. I'm glad you guys are in the Checkpoint family. It's a great product. And let me see. We'll send a follow-up email with any reference content and the recording link of this session. Our next webinar will be in 2 weeks. You'll see an invitation for that soon. Yes. Okay. Yep. You did answer the question, James. They responded. You'll see the invitation for that soon. But thanks again for joining. We'll see you here next time. Thanks, James, for all the info. And everyone, enjoy your day. Have a good one.
Thanks, Rob.
Bye all.